Film Futuristics, a forecasting methodology. Imagine that you are tasked to understand and predict potential future threats. You decide to use film futuristics as a method because it's anchored in depth psychology, particularly Carl Jung's formulation of the collective unconscious, complexes, alchemical metaphors, archetypes, and the concept of individuation. It's a methodology where you research and analyze multiple films, synthesize the collected insights using a hermeneutic, heuristic process, followed by writing 3 fictional scenarios of possible, probable, and preferable futures. Dreams operate in an altered state of consciousness and express themselves in a logically abstract way, often in the language of symbolic imagery, allegory, parable, metaphor, and simile. Just like films, dreams have a language, a dramatic structure. Jung wrote that a dream is a theatre in which the dreamer is himself the scene, the player, the prompter, the producer, the author, the public, and the critic. Dreams are a portal to the source and may also be contemplated in terms of an unfolding dramatic sequence as expressed in classical Greek drama such as exposition, peripeteia, crisis, and lysis. These can be roughly translated as setting, walking about, or development, crises, and outcome. Film futuristics is a critical, action-orientated methodology that may be used to unpack the hidden dimensions and prospective probabilities within films and make the resulting knowledge and insight available to future planning. Film futuristics is a close reading of the depths within artifacts. It is a heuristic, phenomenological hermeneutic whereby the researcher is implicated in the research and reanimates living within the analysis, synthesis, and fictional future histories that are the outcome of the research. By focusing on the myths, symbols, and powerful narratives within film, we can identify harbingers of events to come. Through psychologically understanding the symbolic material and the disguised meanings communicated by these artifacts, film futuristics develops foreknowledge and oracular skills necessary for writing future history that fictionally articulates the possible, probable, and preferable future conditions. Consider this. Films as dreams offer access to the hidden dimensions of the collective unconscious by presenting archetypes as images, sequences of allegories, and metaphors. Now imagine tracking the development of robots or artificial intelligence in order to uncover what is to come. Think of the original Frankenstein from 1931, directed by James Whale and based on Mary Shelley's original story. The bodiless artificial intelligence named HAL in 2001, A Space Odyssey, that was directed by Stanley Kubrick, or the robots TARS and Case in Interstellar, directed by Christopher Nolan in 2014, and the intelligent humanoid in Ex Machina, directed by Alex Garland in 2015. By using the film futuristics methodology and doing a close reading of the film's texts and developmental arc of the androids and robots across decades, you would conclude that a technological singularity will happen and is predicted by these films. The singularity is the hypothesis that the invention of artificial superintelligence will abruptly trigger runaway technological growth, resulting in unfathomable changes to human civilization. Think of a nuclear chain reaction of self-improvement cycles, with each new and more intelligent generation appearing more and more rapidly, causing an intelligence explosion and resulting in a powerful superintelligence that would qualitatively far surpass all human intelligence. The concluding 3 scenarios of this research would therefore expound on and explore the unfathomable changes confronting human civilization. Video games, too, provide experiential learning environments that teach players how to control, dominate, drive cars, and fly planes within simulated environments. In fact, After 9/11, when Western journalists were visiting al-Qaeda safe houses in Kabul, they discovered packaging elements from the popular Microsoft Flight Simulator, a computer game that allowed users to simulate flight takeoffs from the world's largest airports and crash them into skyscrapers, including New York's World Trade Center. The event, known as 9/11 in America, was eerily prefigured in Microsoft's Flight Simulator game. The existence of the game can therefore be considered to have been a warning of imminent danger, a danger that went unnoticed because events tend to be seen in isolation and unconnected. Prior to Microsoft's Flight Simulator video game, a spate of war movies prepared the collective American psyche for things to come, including Tora 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 in 1970, Platoon in 1986, Saving Private Ryan in 1998, and The Three Kings in 1999. Jarringly, The Three Kings was about 3 American soldiers who went into the Iraqi desert to find millions in stolen Kuwaiti bullion and became involved in a democratic uprising. The battle at Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, forced America's hand into World War II through a surprise Japanese kamikaze attack. 18 ships were sunk and 2,403 Americans died. The movie Pearl Harbor, released in 2001, was still fresh in the American cultural mindset when 9/11 occurred, thus preparing the country for rhetoric such as "It's Pearl Harbor all over again." Now, let's briefly talk about reification. The 9/11 event was the result of myriads of forgotten events, crises, and historical political decisions, all of which caused trajectories that careened into the present and continue onward into the future. This forgotten and unconscious material is a result of reification. The products of human activity are apprehended as if they were something other than human products, such as facts of nature, results of cosmic laws, or manifestations of divine will. This implies mankind is capable of forgetting his own authorship of the human world, and further, that the dialectic between mankind the producer and events is lost to consciousness. Film Futuristics delves into this fund of forgotten and culturally unconscious images that often fatally confuse consciousness. It is Film Futuristics' task to re-envision and recover this reified material. As Jung said, the matrix of a mythopoetic imagination which has vanished from our rational age. The cultural therapeutic goal of Film Futuristics is to strengthen and to support an expansion of personal and cultural consciousness, to rouse the personal unconscious of the Film Futuristics researcher, to reveal the unconscious within the event under study, and expose the inner workings of the collective unconscious. The intention is to produce insight, foresight, and superior critical thinking with a concomitant wisdom, thereby lifting the fog caused by participation mystique. Sickness is now out there. Freud and Jung both knew that analysis of neuroses would ultimately escape the therapy room and develop into a form of cultural analysis. In accord with Freud and Jung, James Hillman advocates that theories of neuroses and cultural pathology must be radically extended. Psychology must re-envision the notion of subjectivity itself, because breakdown exists in the world, in events like terrorism, in the ecological and global climate change crises, not just in people. We now encounter pathology in the psyche of politics and medicine, in language and design, in the food we eat. Sickness is now out there, he wrote. Cultural breakdown is producing symptomatic fragments of paranoid politics, manic manufacturing, and the loss of cultural vitality. Because of breakdown, the world is entering a new moment of consciousness by drawing attention to itself by means of its symptoms. It is becoming aware of itself as a psychic reality. James Hillman argues that it must become psychotherapy's task to take up the thread first initiated by Freud, which is fundamentally film futuristics' task, to analytically dissect cultural neuroses, which might lead to therapeutic recommendations which could lay claim to great practical interest. Praxis. Film futuristics requires the researcher to phenomenologically engage in a process of reliving history as a now experience. Cultural artifacts are understood to be manifestations of an age's psychological life, a mirror that returns an accurate picture of forces at work behind the scenes. When tended, the many-faceted symbols are unearthed in the symptoms. The countless myths are uncovered in the multitudinous meanings, and the hidden dreams in the unfamiliar metaphors are revealed in the taken-for-granted truths. Film futuristics is constructed in fundamental stages similar to the principal stages of alchemy. The essence of film futuristics is in performing research, then separation and analysis on one hand, and synthesis and consolidation on the other. This is an alchemical procedure that reunites opposing hostile and previously separated constellations by synthetically reintegrating them and therapeutically transforming separation into unity. Future studies versus film futuristics. The purpose of future studies, or futuristics, is to uncover or invent, examine and evaluate, and propose possible, probable, and preferable futures. Future studies' objective is to grasp today's landscape and how changes, or the lack thereof, may become tomorrow's reality. Ultimately, the end product of every futures methodology is the scenario. Scenarios are fictional stories about possible, probable, and preferable futures. Even a brief example of this process will show how effective the method is and demonstrate the process. Imagine you decide to use film futuristics in a personal capacity to write a novella, but you face a blank page. We will use the same films mentioned previously: Frankenstein, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Interstellar, and Ex Machina. Phase 1. Research begins with a steady, resilient, and steadfast mind, anchored in place like earth packed around a post. Frankenstein is constructed from what we've discarded, orphaned and exiled, the dead parts of previously living human beings. Frankenstein is built completely of our shadows. It is the fundamental story of mankind becoming a god by creating life. Yet, the creator, Victor Frankenstein, abandons his creature and refuses to take responsibility for his creation. The monster becomes marginalized, cast adrift, and becomes the other. The story may also be understood as a prophecy. It's a retelling of the mythic Promethean story. It forces us to see our own psychological blindness and a haunting prescient rendering of the inevitable rise of technological power, artificial life, and AI threatening to rival us. In 2001: A Space Odyssey, we witness primordial apes around a watering hole and the very beginning of bone as tool and weapon. A bone is tossed high into the air. A tracking shot follows it up, revealing satellites circling the Earth. The soundtrack is Johann Strauss's Blue Danube, the name of Britain's first operational nuclear weapon. The fundamental plot is that we are not alone. Humanity has found a mysterious monolith on Earth that sends a signal to another on the Moon. This is an evolutionary story. Sometime in the past, someone or something nudged advancement and placed monoliths on the Earth, on the Moon, and on Jupiter in order to warn or signal the maturity of human development. HAL 9000 and the human Bowman set off on a quest. A race to Jupiter begins with two players in competition to win a battle. Whoever wins and reaches the monolith creators achieves the next step in human evolution. Will it be man or machine? Interstellar begins by showing us a near future and an approaching apocalypse. blight, famine, and crops ending their resource life cycles. Oxygen has begun to deplete the dirt itself and has turned on mankind. The earth is cursed. The wind-torn dust of death contrasts with Eden. Blight and famine occur because we have genetically modified crops and geoengineered the atmosphere. The narrative Interstellar is a warning, as well as proposing alternative responses for a resource-afflicted civilization. This movie is a strategic warning scenario with crucial components. Under the guise of fiction, it anticipates the way our society could choose to fail, yet Interstellar proposes that it is possible to invent the future and intervene in the present. Space exploration suggests Interstellar holds the key to our survival through new off-world possibilities. In Ex Machina, Ava is the first artificial superintelligence to rival human capabilities. Caleb wins an online competition to spend time at Nathan's house laboratory far away on an isolated mountainside. He discovers that he is to administer a test, the Turing test, conceived by Alan Turing in 1950 to determine if a computer is as intelligent as a human. The aim is to be unable to distinguish the responses between machine and human to questions. Nathan says to Caleb, "If you've created a conscious machine, it's not the history of man, that's the history of gods." This is narcissism in action, a current cultural obsession in Silicon Valley. Isn't artificial intelligence a very narcissistic field of research? Are we not attempting to surpass ourselves? The central conceit is that creating human-like intelligence is both desirable and an ultimate achievement. Phase 2. Now we move from research to separation and analysis on one hand, and synthesis and consolidation on the other. Inequality between the sexes exists. Inequality of pay for the same work is rampant. Humankind is attempting to become God, as the Promethean myth suggests. Stealing fire and mastering technology to create artificial intelligence that rivals humankind may be doomed. We're obsessed. Our geoengineering and resource-depleting hydrocarbon society is causing blight, famine, and global climate change, which threatens our very survival. We are entering an end zone, catastrophic apocalypse for planet Earth. Our only solution is to travel to the stars and experience the final abyss. Perhaps the only conceivable future is to advance the computer into a genetic computer-human hybrid possessing the full capabilities of human masculinity and femininity that balances itself out and creates a third thing, an AI with soul perhaps. This then becomes the ultimate combination. This is how we transcend death as human beings. The underlying narrative is that the singularity is pending. Humankind's key to defeating the real enemy, death, is to become God. This is how we leave Eden. Phase 3. Now we write 3 scenarios and create future history. Scenario A is the possible future. Scenario B is the probable future. These are written from the perspective of each constellated opposite as revealed in the analytical phase. Scenario C becomes the preferable future. This scenario performs the alchemical conjunctio function by reuniting the constellated opposites identified simply as A plus B equals C. Scenario A, the possible future. AI has found its way to Google and Uber. We'll call it Goa. It is finding better ways for cities to move, work, live and thrive. Drivers earn money on their schedule with their own vehicles. A passenger hops into a Goa in Philadelphia. No human driver exists anymore, only robots, good-looking robots. You, the passenger, have requested who you want, a transgender, neutral or anime character. You've also chosen a conversation, a philosophical one, where the deepest questions are examined, or the latest political news from the left or the right. It's all choices in the application. Goa used big data to collect it all. The brand mark on the dashboard is Toogle. It's Tesla and Google combined. Scenario B, the probable future. Goa's early adoption of AI is too early. Major incidents and massive deaths from autonomous accidents causes legislative delays. Tesla loses interest in domestic electric vehicle production and instead redirects focus on the first mission to Mars. One reason is because of the redirection of the preeminent first world democracy towards supporting right-wing dictators instead of shunning them and shutting them out. This, and a reckless rebuilding of the oil and gas industry and the reneging on the Paris Agreement, the UN framework on climate change, combined with the gutting of the United States EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the US State Department and the Department of Education in the US, causes a generational retardation of well-informed citizens. Panic in the streets ensues. America destabilizes. China expands, pushing into the Pacific Rim, influencing and currying flavor with Australia and Africa. Russia and America become the best of friends, manipulating and muscling the last of the planet's resources while plunging the Earth into an ever earlier apocalypse. Scenario C, the preferable future. Goa and Airbnb and other sharing gig-type economies explode onto the global stage, disrupting mega corporations, the global travel, hotel, and the transportation industries. The nationalistic right-wing move from Brexit to Trump in the United States to Putin in Russia, rising nationalistic dictators in India, Germany, Japan, Venezuela, Poland, and France all come to power because of the failed promises of globalization. A new age of crony capitalism emerges. Globalization is stopped dead in its tracks for now, but the pendulum swings away from the multinationals and the mega-rich who banked on the continuation of a pliable consuming marketplace. Everyone on the planet begins to have less reliance on the corporate paycheck, on being an employee or being used as consumers by businesses and their offerings. Established power systems begin to wane. Everything goes local and tribal, but stays informed through social media. Confidence in democracy and capitalism wanes. New models begin to emerge. Peer-to-peer marketing and lending, a revitalization of the creative class ensues, and leisure becomes the new game in town. Robots and AI manufacture and do everything. Leisure becomes the new industry, and new models emerge that don't require an honest day's work anymore to live a full and well-structured life. Here, we have three scenarios and the beginning framework from which to construct a prescient, fictional, fantastic story about a trans-modern human being, part-time Goa driver, part-time hotelier, making money with Bitcoin and peer-to-peer lending, leading a life of liberation and leisure.